Many became having no income, and people's consumption has come down. The economy has gone into a recessionary status. What is more important about this lockdown's impact in India is, compared to other countries, our country has a very large unorganized informal sector, and that was very badly affected. People working in those sectors, they became jobless. And what followed was a kind of humanitarian crisis in the form of having no income, starvation, etc. And when the Prime Minister announced the package, people were very much expectant how this package is going to tackle this crisis, the crisis largely of this health and the resultant economic, particularly of the humanitarian crisis. So what my plan is to look at the kind of aspirations or expectations that people had before the announcement of the package. Slide. And how appropriate the package is to address these issues. Issues in the form of, one is to revive the economy back. Can you see the slides? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes.
You can
Yes,
see that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Audible also? Okay,
Yeah,
thank
you
you.
are audible.
Yes, sir. Audible.
So the question that I am looking at, broadly, it is how appropriate the package is to address these 2-3 issues. One is to revive the economy back and also tackle some of the emerging or immediate issues which we categorize as this humanitarian crisis. And my examination of this broad question is again being woven around 2 related questions. That is, what is the nature of the crisis and what is the nature of the economic package? As all of us know, Indian economy was in a status of slowdown. And there was the fall of our economy's growth for the last 2 years. From about 6.1 in the first quarter of 2018, it has fallen very much and reached a level of 4.2% by the third quarter of the 2019-20 financial year. Also, the reasons we know. All the important segments of the economy, both domestic as well as external sector, it was sharing this slowdown. Export has fallen, aggregate demand, private investment as well as consumption has fallen. And this crisis affected, or this slowdown affected, almost all the sectors of the economy, productive sectors, largely of the manufacturing, and some of the service sectors like construction or real estate, they were badly affected. And the reason of the crisis, as we know, it is mainly of a demand-induced crisis. Of course, this demand induced crisis itself was an offshoot or something that follows some of the external shocks that India had with the implementation of GST, and back to that, the introduction of this demonetization. That affected the consumption demand, particularly in the rural sector. The consumer sentiments were low. The investment or business people's sentiments were low to invest. Affected badly some of the durable consumption things like automobiles, and it's the production also, it has been largely this kind of consumer durables and even heavy goods industries. It is in this setting that India encountered this COVID-19 pandemic. As I already mentioned, this COVID-19 pandemic, it was followed by a very extensive and probably a severe lockdown in our country. Almost all the countries in the world have undergone, or to prevent or to check this health crisis, adopted this kind of measure. But compared to all these countries, what the situation in India? As I said, it was something of a very large and very strenuous type of one. And lockdown meant there is no moving out of transport of goods and services. And what actually was working is some of the essential activities, either in the health sector and of course in the agricultural sector, and some of the administrative activities. And the lockdown, in fact, followed by a kind of unemployment. Many people become jobless. As I already mentioned, this unorganized sector, the field was, or this hit was so high. Of our labor force, this unorganized sector, which constitute about 90%, and the aggregate figure it is putting as nearly 45 crores of people. Separating these agricultural laborers who became unemployed because of this lockdown comes about 30 to 35 crores. Having no employment, no income. No income, the consumption is reduced, or even consuming what others are giving. Of course, the problem that arises, this fall in demand, it was looking a little more closely. It was because of the lockdown and the protections were brought to a standstill. So the immediate cause of this kind of crisis was this supply factors. The whole supply chain was disrupted as economic activities consequently disrupted. What we find is the COVID-19 crisis, which affected our economy, it added the supply dimension to our existing demand crisis. So that is the very nature of this crisis. It is both a demand and supply crisis. And I already noted a point at the very outset. This disruption affected very badly the organized segment. A large segment became unemployed, become having no money, having no income, and they have reduced their consumption. And within the unorganized labor group, probably we had to mention this so-called the migrants, which is nowadays getting more of our attention. And that comes about 14 lakhs, 14 crores of migrants, some estimated these countries. They were the most hit of this humanitarian crisis. And many of them having...
Philip sir, 1 second.
Yes.
Bosimon, please stop presenting. Bosimon, Chaco, please stop presenting. Thank you, sir. Sir, you can continue.
Having no livelihoods, or their livelihoods has come to a kind of bad situation. Naturally, they have gone back to their source places. And the picture that we have seen, millions of migrants trudging towards their domestic states. And that itself has brought so many other dimensions of the problem. So I'm not going to the details. So the point that I am bringing at this point as regards this nature of the crisis is it's broadly of both a supply as well as a demand-induced crisis. And it is having a much humanitarian dimension for this crisis. That is in the form of starvation, the form of falling consumption, form of other hardships to the people of the country. And it is in this background our Prime Minister announced this economic package. While doing his announcement, he was in fact citing some of these cases, quoting from his speech on 12th May. In the last days, a few days, we have seen the suffering of our workers, migrant laborers, street vendors, daily wages, and farmers. This package will be aimed at them. But it will not be something of a relief package. It will be a package that is in fact to revive the economy, reviving the economy by reinstalling its supply chain or connecting this supply chain. And also thinking of a vision in a way he has put it as rebuilding or rebounding the economy back. And for that, he has exuded the philosophy or this idea of a self-reliant India. And the 3 pillars of, he has identified 5 pillars where this emphasis is to be given. The infrastructure, demography, a technology-driven system, strengthening demand and supply chains, and also supply chain being in the local economy. And the mechanism or the ways that he has suggested for it or called is to make corrections or changes in 4 L's. One is improving the liquidity and make reforms in labor, and also change in the land. And finally, it is the labor side. So these are the 4 L's through which this edifice is to be built. And the announcements we know. He has announced the package as something of 20 lakhs. And that comes about 10% of our GDP. And again, this dates and other things, that is of course not due. And coming to some of the details, the package consists mainly of, one is the relief thing, and the second is to certain bailout programs, and third, some of the economic reforms or structural reforms or legal things. And in fact, this is something like a coalescing exercise, that we can say, the whole package. Coalescing in the sense it is something of a mixed. Before May 22 itself, what is on March 27, that is 3 days after the lockdown, there was an announcement that is largely of this relief things. That is what's shown in this slide. That comes about 1.7 lakhs. And along and also followed by that, there was certain announcement by the RBI. And why RBI has gone for such an announcement, or that is largely of the monetary thing? Because the lockdown, the issue which I could have mentioned there, the income has fallen, demand has fallen. And the fall in income, in fact, is followed by, or it is being because of fall in production. And fall in production means the producer sides, they don't have no sales or no income. So what is, for them, it is a kind of liquidity crisis. And in order to address this liquidity crisis, for both the producers as well as the consumers, this monitoring thing has been announced. And the usual techniques were adopted. There was this policy cut, the repo rate and the reverse repo rate. It has drastically brought down. And the rate has brought nearly 3.35 of this reverse, and the other is about 4%. Given a 4% average inflation, the interest rate has brought down to nearly 1%. And not only this cost of capital, but also for the accessibility of capital. That is largely the liquidity issues related. And the measures adopted, one is this cash reserve ratio has brought down to 3%. And then targeted long-term repo operations were paid. And then marginal standing facility, etc. But all this was an infusion of liquidity. And another way is to urge banks to nudge them to lend. It has adopted a widening the monetary policy corridor, which is nothing but reducing this reverse repo rate. Otherwise, when with this lack of demand for credit or other things, these commercial banks may opt for this kind of reserving their funds in or depositing their funds in reserve banks. And also certain regulatory easings. And the total amount of that comes about this liquidity. That is about 80 lakhs, more than 80 lakhs. And probably the biggest or one is the most expected. That is of the 5 tranches announcement by the finance minister from March 13 to, May 13 to 17. That was largely of the bailouting this SSI sector, bailouting non-banking financial intermediaries, bailouting the housing sector, and also the mostly affected agricultural sector, and then certain providing certain relief to what is guest workers or migrants. And this kind of bailout package or this kind of things were during the first 3 days. For the 4th and 5th day, it was largely of economic reforms or what we call as structural changes. And changes in land, again, that details, this Essential Commodities Act repealing and contract farming, that is repealing of this, introduction of this contract farming, and this APMC's operations that again be regulated. And again at this, in order to attract private capital, certain key or 8 strategic areas were opened. That is particularly defense, atomic energy, minerals or mines, and then civil aviation, etc., including space. So this was broadly the content of this package. So looking this package altogether, as I said, the first package, which was basically of a relief type package, composing of extension of certain kind as well as cash. And the second package or second category, which is of largely or mainly monetary, which is of course of liquidity. And third, largely of the bailing out of this agriculture or a small scale or this non-banking financial intermediaries. And what you can find is some interesting aspects of this package. So it is, the situation was, as we know, there was problems at the demand side. There was problems at the supply side. But looking at the package, what you know, the mode in which it has been extended or a package is made up of. The cash outlay, and cash outlay we know that is meant to address the immediate problems. Those have been most affected by this problem. That constitute only 0.8%. We can say it is either as this PM Care or it is fund 500 rupees per given to this Jan Dhan accounts, etc., etc. And even if we add certain other things, that is EPF contribution and other things, and also some of this MRG funds, that is another 4,000. What the picture is, if we add that also, other than this direct cash from the part of the government, the fiscal items comes just about 1.5%. I said it is largely a bailing out package, or mainly a bailing out package. That was more in the form of credit guarantees. The government does not incur any cash, or of course it is put as a fiscal thing, but it is largely in the form of a liquid thing. And again, this non-fiscal for infrastructure development, for that is marketing purposes or other things, the agriculture, and also in this exercise, that is the non-fiscal, or this debt type, which is again. And of course, the other liquidity proper by the monetary system. That is actually the color of the package, or the character of the package. It is largely of a monetary policy type package. So the fiscal component, in fact, is very less. And within the fiscal components, some of the fiscal things, again, is of already budget allotted. That is this MRNG, or this Prime Minister's Kishan, that has been given as cash, that has already been in this 2020-21 budget. So the cash payment, and largely the fiscal thing, that constitute probably a less or even a minuscule. So summing up what I am telling, where is low direct spending by the government, very little relief measures, largely in the form of a bailout package, and it is largely of the debt-based or poor budgetary support. And what the government was expecting, a recovery through liquidity push and credit easing. For that, it was outsourcing the banking system. The government's responsibility is outsourced for recovery to the banking system. And then there was this legal and structural reforms. So the two important colors of this, or character of this package as such, it is having a dominance of this monetary policy content or liquidity aspect. And largely it is of long-term measures also. The economic reforms. And also debt assistance for investment in agriculture. And also this bailout packages in this small scale sector and other things. That is of long-term measure. And this in economics, we can characterize, or using our macro understanding of things, we can characterize this largely of supply side. Supply side is maintaining or managing by these reforms, or providing infrastructure, or making long-term investment, and making the system more business friendly. So what coming out is very little stimulus. Now the question is whether it is able to address some of the pertinent issues that India is facing. Coming back to the growth story, last week we had come across the the announcement by the CSO of the growth. What is the picture? The picture is the last quarter, the growth has come down to 3.1%. And that is about 6 days since the lockdown has adopted. And lockdown was continuing and economic strain was there. And what is the kind of predictions that is now going on? The economy is in a sort of deep recession now. And deep recession, as it is predicted by almost all the credit agencies. Even RBI yesterday has put it as going to have a 1.5%, or will be in the negative terrain. And this deep recession that gripped our economy, it is now has a phase of largely of demand constraint. And this demand constraint again is initiated by some of the supply constraints due to the lockdown. And the supply constraint, in fact, worsened the already existing demands. But what the government is going, or the package as such, is little bit of reflection, showing us a kind of paradox. An issue that is to be tackled at the demand side, that is going to be tackled by supply side things. An issue which is, again, immediate, the slowdown of the economy, fall in demand, fall in investment. Not only this, and we know the latest picture, health sector, that's again giving a very doom picture. What we have is lockdown has not only, in fact, flattened our economy, but it has brought something like a very exponential type of health situation, or this pandemic in our country. The last 7 days, we know the magnitude of the confirmed cases. Now India is at the 4th place in this newly added cases per day. In the total cases, again, our place has come up to the 7th position. Not simply the cases, but also the deaths. The on average death is about 211. You can have it from the lower half of that graph. Our position is at the 4th place. So we are encountering now a situation which is further worse than what has actually when this package announced. I don't say because of this particular nature of the package that this thing has happened. But what my contention is, this worsening of the economy, this worsening of the health sector would have been reduced if the package had of a different orientation. That is, it is having fiscal stimulus. Now let me add, why is such a contention that I am holding, or why it is probably it will be less effective, I think, given this high liquidity. What the banking system have been doing, they were not taking risk. What the people have been doing, and using our Keynesian terminology, they were in a state of liquidity preference. Look at the deposits. But the banks, they were credit aversive, or they were reluctant to take risk. Why it is? We have certain fundamental explanations for it. The business sentiment is weak. The consumer sentiment is again weak. Yesterday, RBI has released its latest consumer survey, both for the current as well as the future. It is bleak. And in this situation, a monetary policy, in fact, is less effective compared to a fiscal policy as such. So what is needed is a fiscal policy. Again, I like to quote Keynes. Monetary policy can bring some kind of recession or slowdown in the economy. For that, it is a sufficient condition. But for a recovery, it is not. It is a necessary condition, probably, but it is not a sufficient condition. For a sufficient condition, this fiscal policy is needed. And fiscal policy in the form of direct spending from the part of the government. And fiscal policy that is addressing the immediate issues in the form of the falling demand of the consumption side, and again falling the demand of the consumption side, that is more in the unorganized sector, the labor class, the farming community, the rural segment, and of course the demand side. I shall wind up this part adding one interesting aspect. I already mentioned what the banking system was doing. When there is such kind of fall in these sentiments or confidence lacking, when people are risk aversive, the credit intake is falling, people prefer liquidity. And the banking system also is preferring liquidity. If you look at the government securities deposit ratio, so during the months of April and May, or particularly March and April, many of these liquidity inducing or enhancing measures were adopted. The first one was to this long-term type extend credit to these corporates. In fact, they have given credit to them. And the second tranche, or then the second pack, or this April 17, this long-term credit, one of the component was to extend it for this non-banking financial activities. But the banking system was doing is, they were reluctant to provide credit to these non-banking financial intermediaries. They are also reluctant to extend credit to this SMSs, I mean MSMEs. And MSMEs themselves are not approaching that, of course, there. And what they are parking their funds in this RBI. And this is not a new phenomenon. If you look at that graph backwards, what you can find is, in Indian context, to address the slowdown that has erupted in our country, 2018 onwards, which we say, of course, it is even before that. And this bank rate was brought down drastically from 6.25%. But what actually happened? The credit hasn't grown. But what they were doing that more in this kind of skipping as reverse repos or as deposit in this RBI. So this is what actually happened. This experience that India had, and theory was also, we had the theory, and even other countries what actually had done. Of course, the size of our package is relatively high. It's come about 10, quite equivalent to what the US as regards the share, even the absolute amount, it is high. And the relative size, in fact, is high. But those countries, what they had done, it is largely of the fiscal and direct cash or cash payments. Cash payments for as wage compensation, cash payments for other income earners. And that is to enhance or to create demand. So this is a sort of paradox. I began with that paradox while narrating this thing. And this kind of paradox. And another paradox, of course, is short term. The thrust is on long term. Capability buildings, reforming the economy, the legal side or other things. And this kind of inconsistency we can in another way also. One of the ideas that the Prime Minister was putting in the whole package or in the first day, India is planning to, or we have to rebound something of a self-sufficient India. We should be vocal about local, quoting his own words. But actually in the reform side, how much local is there? So on the one side, the rhetoric of self-sufficient, I mean, self-sufficient economy we're talking, or self-reliant. On the other side, even the very strategic areas, defense. 75% of investment is permitted in defense. And even US, there is certain controls. And privatization is extended in almost all the sectors. And let me add one more thing that is again probably come in this context. Self-sufficiency, in fact, is not only producing things locally or having economic activity within the economy. Self-sufficiency involves a larger, inclusive type of growth, including what? The disadvantaged. But the package as such, how much attention is given in this package? How much is given for the so-called migrants, other than certain reliefs in the form of very addressing their immediate meals or hand-to-mouth existence? What about their employment? And again, this kind of lack of inclusiveness we can find even in the announcement of some of these bailout packages. One of the key announcements is related to this SSI sector or MSMEs. It involves 2-3 important things. One is government itself is buying from this SMEs a certain portion, and it's buying it has to buy from this MSMEs. And then stressed SMEs, an additional debt of 20,000 is to be given. And also that is setting up of a capital fund or this fund for funds for these SMEs. Actually, which type of SMEs can avail these benefits? The SMEs comes about nearly 464 lakhs. Out of that, 96% is the micro type. Micro type means their investment is just about 1 crore or less than that. Government has changed the definition, a definitional change of this MSMEs. A 5 times multiplication to its investment limit. Not only investment, also it involved there is a turnover thing. What actually going to happen is this, in this MSME category, some of the medium-sized or even the earlier large-sized enterprises will enter. So many of these benefits or this bailout package, it is going to benefit them rather than the small entities in this. It is the small entities that is providing employment to the larger. So the migrants, those who are working largely in the unorganized sector, their employment issue, and then package or steps to provide them more income generating, that is not addressed. On the one side, the reform has a policy twist or in the form of more of privatization, the capital. So whose interest as such this package in fact reflects? It is largely the interest of capital. The interest of labor, in fact, remains unaddressed. That remains unaddressed, I like to add. Now the government is lamenting about or concerned about this increase in the number of COVID-19 cases. How that happened? One of the reasons, I'm not stigmatizing this migrant community, one of the reasons is the migrants are moving towards their source areas or source states, either in Bihar or in Odisha. Even in Kerala, that is the case, but it is the reason, the type of migrants, of course, different. And what I am bringing again is, if their issue is addressed at the destination itself, in the urban areas, and their work settings, providing them with some kind of wage compensation or income transfers, and keeping them in these places, this aggravation wouldn't have happened. Of course, it may be a type of postmortem, but I think the way in which it is handled, or this very orientation of the package, in fact, compel me to bring out this kind of aspects. And another implication I like to mention is the responsibility is entrusted to the banking system. What is going to happen to the banking system? The ways government is guaranteeing, of course, but largely it is of the this moratorium type. For the time being, the balance sheet of this banking system will be okay. If there is fall in business, fall in production, fall in economic activity, can the banking system expect a repayment of loans? If they cannot have a repayment of loans, what will happen? Now the banking system or other financial system is relatively stable. It will fall into a kind of weak banks, as we had in 2017-18. Not only the banking system. Actually, this SSI sector or this unorganized sector, their financing is largely come from this non-banking financial intermediaries. And they also, for the time being, is stable. One is less credit outgo, and they are also being provided with some kind of credit from the part of banking and other things. If weak business activity, low repayment, they themselves are creditors to the banking system. So already they are in a crisis because of this housing crisis and other things. And what is going to happen? Or what we say, this doctor itself is going to get deceased. Actually, the number of deceased of this Indians at large, even institution itself going to get deceased. So that is another way of looking at. And to have a recovery, to have a rebound, we should have this institution. What is actually compelling the government? All of you know the reasons. Probably it is this fiscal responsibility and Management Act, FRBM Act, that's stipulations that debt is to be reduced or other things. Why? It is needed for attracting capital. And government is expecting capital flown into the country from China because of China's particular situation now. And for that, a less involved government or minimum government is required. There should be steps in the form of tax forbearance and other kind of soaps. And labor is to be docile. If labor is provided with income and other things in their source country or places where they now, then there is less chance of them coming back to these urban areas. So we want to build up an economy. That means excusing labor share, excusing what labor's rewards. And we have certain legislations in some of the states extending the working hours of labor from 8 to 12 and changing the working conditions like UP, Haryana, etc. So we are talking about the 4 L's. L in the form of law, L in the form of liquidity, and L in the form of what? Labor, and the other not coming. But what I'm telling is all these 4 L's. The 3 L's are okay. But we are, in a sense, unfriendly to this most important pillar which is supposed to be needed in the revival or rebounding of the economy. And that needs more of not only transfer of income or compensation. That needs more investment in the form of health. And coming to the health issue, it is not just because of this pandemic things. More investment in the form of education. Why many of these people are migrating? It's not something like aspirational migration for higher education or getting a better job. It's something of distressed migration. And distressed migration is because of what? Their incapabilities. They cannot find job. They are unskilled. They are incapable. And they should be educated. They should be provided with more health. The package. Making some passive reference. So it's not addressing this particular issue. I think with some of these ideas, I can come to the conclusion of my sharing of views. So what require or to should be more balanced. Balance in the sense there should be more fiscal things in the package, more cash transfers. So the heterodox group, they are suggesting, I attend one of the talks by Jayati Ghosh. She was suggesting a kind of yet another relief package, again constituting 5% of GDP. That is what the immediate needs. Otherwise, these problems may creep in. So anyway, one thing I am sure, a revival or rebounding will take a longer time if a strategy like this. And the hardships will be more. To reduce that. And it will be more inclusive. And this hardship, again, I am coming to this, the humanitarian crisis due to more kind of starvation, poverty, etc. So let us wish for the best. With these words, I conclude. Thank you very much for your listening.
Now participants can ask your queries in the chat box, or you can unmute your mic and ask the questions to the resource person. Hello.
Hello, is it to me or to the participants?
Sir, can you see the chat box, or shall I?
Can you read it out, teacher?
Okay.
Okay.
Can you elaborate how MSMEs help the speaker can comment on how MSMEs? I'm not clear about this question. That's why I'm. Get.
My question is that how MSMEs can get the help that is announced for the government from the bank, because bank is not getting loan easily in these days. So how MSMEs get those help that is announced by the government?
So, okay. So what I am trying to tell is, as you know, the package includes this collateral-free loans. That means government is guaranteeing the loans in that sense, worth 3 lakhs crores. And also another one is the subordinated debt of another 2 lakhs crores. That is for stressed MSMEs. Stressed MSMEs. And also this is a loan part, basically. And how to get loans for them? And I said, in which category they belong. One requirement for availing the first type is they should have a credit. They should already having credit, and the amount of credit they could avail is 20% of this outstanding credit of the merchant or February. And the interesting thing of this MSME credit is, of the total MSME is majority, probably 80 to 80% is having no exposure to credit or exposure to credit of low amount. So how much credit that we can give avail, that is the issue. And also this definitional change. The threshold is lifted to the investment limit and also this turnover. Threshold as enhanced means what? There will be new entrants to this MSME group. They may be large. The already medium-sized may go into the category of micro. And there will be a competition of this medium and medium into the small and small into this micro. So there will be a kind of competition of this big and small ones. So the gain will of course be for the big ones in this the availability of credit, or yeah. And the kind of thing that the government can do in order to restore MSME activities or to revive. I don't know whether you have seen a survey recently by this manufacturing organizations. During this lockdown, or that the survey was done in May second half, 1/3 of SMSEs is closed down because of that. And yesterday also a survey was made. And for them, they are, in a sense, doing some kind of laying off. That is how they are going to prune their activities, or to coming back to revive their economic activities. So MSMEs to avail loans, the banks themselves had to take the risk. So in the current situation, whether banking system is ready to take risk, even though there is government guarantee. And for the minor ones, or this micro ones, the possibility of getting them loan is relatively less because of this new entrance of the definitional change. So that is what I like to comment. And what the government can do is their problem is to pay the interest, even if they have. So some kind of interest write-off, or you can extend some kind of subsidies or income transfers to make payments to the laborers, etc. That the government can do. So I think we have to go beyond these long aspects for bringing back the MSMEs. I think I responded to your query. Thank you. Teacher?
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes.
Sir. Hello. Good afternoon, sir. This is Rupa Kumari from Binia. Sir, there is a question. Nowadays, if we go through Keynes' theory of consumption, people are using their past savings to fulfill their need.
Pardon?
People are using their savings. Sir, I have put this in chat box also.
Okay.
Past saving to fulfill their need. But many have received a package by government to fulfill their consumption, what they have, current consumption we can say. But many have been remained unseen by the government also. Means they are not in the list of government. Many people are there, many shopkeepers are there who cannot open their shop. They have to go, or many businessmen are there who don't have enough money to survive, to fulfill their needs. So how they will be benefited by the government? Will government? This is my question.
So your question is, many remained outside.
Yes, sir. Many have remained
the
outside.
Government's ambit, is it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, that's absolutely true. That was the case with respect to this migrants, and this free meals or free food items were provided. Many haven't had any ration cards or documentation to have it. They were outside that. And the large number of people in the unorganized sector is not getting benefits because of this lack of documentation. The documentation that the government is adopting, we have two things. One is this bank account, and another is of this MGNREGIM work cards. Yeah. And work cards, the number is nearly 13 crores, I think. And of that active come about 8 crores. The government is thinking of this transmission through that. Then it can accommodate a larger segment rather than just going through this bank accounts. So the important way to address this issue, why this many remains unaccounted or undocumented. So proper documentation has to take place. And this proper documentation is done either this kind of MGNREG or through these kind of bank accounts and other things. And I think government is thinking of that line, and some of the ways providing ration cards and other things, probably a step in that direction.
So, but I
And
think
there
it will
this
take a long time
village community or this panchayats and other the decentralized administration can do a lot of things. And then the employer themselves, they can also do certain things. So in so many fronts, this kind of exclusion is to be addressed. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your valuable lecture.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, is it Cyril?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I attended the lecture very carefully.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
but I would like to explore the other side of the problem too.
What is that? Which
Like,
side?
the general idea seems to be that we should announce, full budgetary supported 5% or 10% package, right?
Yeah.
But then say there is very meager GST, almost no income tax, no value-added tax from petrol sales. So given all these things, like, how can the government finance this sort of a big package only through fiscal measures? I mean, can the government borrow or print this much money?
Okay. In fact, that is one of the views regarding this economic package. But my views are rather balanced in that sense. I don't hold that the whole thing has to come from this fiscal side. But what I was trying to bring out is the fiscal side is proportionately very low. What is the monetary things or this liquidity aspect is dominating. And what seems in the whole package is the monetary thing is taken as a substitute for fiscal. But it should be something like a complement. The fiscal is needed to instill demand. Liquidity is there. On that one side, there is lack of demand or effective demand is lacking. And then how to incentivize this investment? There the fiscal policy has a role. I was emphasizing that. And what is the fiscal content is rather a negligible portion or not at all significant in this case to address. That is the first part. It's true that government has these constraints. Its income flows either on this GST or the direct taxes. Again, the country is going to face a fall in GDP and other things. Then again, there can be fall in income. But thinking the other way, what will happen? What are the predictions of economic growth? It's unanimous from the part of policymakers and economists. there will be a contraction. Only what is the quantum of contraction? That is probably 4 or 5%. 4 or 5% fall in contraction means economic growth, or income fall means what? Naturally, there will be a fall in income. So in order to reduce the fiscal deficit or this debt component for the time being, as we say, we are expecting some kind of problems related to that, inflation and other things. That itself will bring down this income. That will again bring down the total taxes. That will bring down again this expenditure. That is the kind of the way it is working. It may work. I don't see. So that is why we have to be more balanced in this case. And those were the much needed, having more kind of propensity to consume. And they have to be brought into the track. And here is probably a fiscal policy largely can do. Even the conservative economies, as I said, it is UK and other US, what we find. In their package, this assumes a large component. Even the Nobel laureates who had interviews with Rahul Gandhi, their suggestion was also of this type. And with the traditional mode of mobilization is not possible, we have to go for this. Again, the older one of this monetizing debt. And the expectation is that when a revival happens, this debt reduction is possible. Revival means not only more income, but also more taxes or more revenue for the government. I think such a logic is also practiced in this present juncture. Okay, so, Cyril.
Yeah, but still there are disagreements, but for the timing I'll keep it to myself and allow others to.
Okay, fine. Teacher?
Sir,
Yes.
another question has come from Professor P.J. Thomas from the Department of English.
Okay.
I think he can ask the question directly to Dr. Andy Philip.
Okay.
I invite Professor P.J. Thomas to ask the question directly to Andy Philip.
My God, hello.
Yeah, Thomas, hi.
Congratulations, and I really appreciate your lecture. So it is not a big question, but it's a small observation.
Yeah.
In India right now, sound economics is under suspension or under embargo. There are no sound economists saying anything about what is happening in India. So in other words, in India now we have to talk more politics than economics, because economics is controlled by RSS in a way. So we have an RSS BJP ideology that is being reflected in the economic policies. So it is basically a policy of austerity. If you look at the RSS ideology, you will find that you have the khaki knicker and the semi-Gandhi cap and all that. So I think that is reflected in the policy also. So they don't believe in spending now, but they they want people to suffer now, so that there will be a Ramarajya to come. So therefore, we have to, along with discussing economics, but we must also, I think, discuss politics, because it is a politics that is now taking upper hand over economics. So which means that sound economics and sound economic discussions are almost invalidated in the present Indian regime. That's just an observation.
Yeah. As it is a presentation, I am not taking the words RSS, BJP, and other things, but I agree with that kind of observation. That is, they are being guided by one type of economic thought, or so not adopting a holistic or a heterodox approach to economics. This alternative ideas, alternative approaches. That's again because of the kind of politics that they are having, and we know it is more of this right-wing politics, and right-wing politics, of course, have a kind of economics or economic principle it has. Whatever concern at present is a similar kind of politics of in a different context we can find in the US or even UK. But what is interesting is they have gone for a kind of, at least for the time being, shredding off their beliefs, or they have incorporated this ideology or this kind of prescription in their package. But here we are adhering to a particular type. And one problem I find is, this government during its regime, if you remember, there was this toppling of in the institution. The planning commission is no more there. And this finance commission again is a beam of that. That means almost all the institutions do not have autonomy. Institutions do not have autonomy means it doesn't have this kind of, not only institutions and even political setup also, this kind of discourse or deliberations or alternative ideas or entertained. Of this, the important thing is an institution which is capable to advise the government, in fact, is lacking now. Probably that also we can add at present, this Niti Aayog. Its thinking is in one way. We know the kind of advices it made regarding this demonetization exercise, and what kind of perils it brought in, and such other things. And as you said, it is not something of a kind of party. It's largely of a centralization of power, a centralization of or exclusion of alternative ideas, something of that kind of things that probably is working. And even we have benevolent despots in history as well as even at present. But even that also don't happen in our case. That's how we can conclude that point. Thank you, Thomas, for your listening. I should be grateful to you for sparing time for it. Yes.
Sir, another question is from Anand Joseph Benny. And he asked the question like this. Sir, since it is uncertain about the demand side of the economy in the upcoming period, since the amount of people may have gone unemployed is very large, is it really helpful the supply side relaxations to boost the economy?
Yeah, I think let me put his question in this way. One side there is demand and there is unemployment, and whether that will help the supply side. And that is one of the logic that those are at the administration is keeping while making changes in these labor laws. As I said, have a very docile labor, which is paid less, having more hardships, and they will be persuaded then to move to this kind of industries or other kind of economic activities. If they are provided with some kind of reliefs, income or employment opportunities in their own places, it will harm the private capital investment, and private capital investment, that is actually the logic that adheres is that of the supply side things. It logic in fact is I totally agree with it. Make things competitive or efficient, it is needed. But such a possibility is there. But the point is, we have to have a long wait, and we have to, the cost may be more high. Both men, that means the pain or other kind of sacrifices that the people have to make. And in the form of starvation, in the form of poverty and other things. And that is a possibility. So it is a distant possibility. But for the time being, what the government has to address, and that is the very responsibility of the government, or what is their duty bound, to address the concern of the people, concern of the large group. That is actually democracy means. It should be inclusive of all types, all categories, etc. But for the time being, this is what may be working better. Okay, thank you, Alan.
Sir, another question that is from Alina and Matthew. I think you have answered this question one way or the other way during your talk partially. And the question is like this: what we lack is a stimulus package. The government proudly said that they allotted 10% of the GDP for this COVID package, while Japan has allotted 20% of GDP. They spend half the budget towards the cash hangouts. That is what we need actually. From this package, people are not getting money directly in the hands, especially the MSME sector.
Yeah. So what?
The question is, what are the alternative measures that are taken by government to get money directly into the hands of the people? I think that may be the question. In this package, whether there is there are steps that is taken by the government to get money directly into the hands of the people.
Actually, that is the nature of this package. Actually, your question itself has that answer. Either it is as a relief thing, or as those who have lost their income or wages or getting unemployed, they were not properly compensated. And that is the very character or one of the very limitation of this. Only a minuscule is what given in this package. And provided more of that kind is given, we could have expected a better kind of a speedy revival, I argue, and probably a better recovery. And that even could have avoided this crisis of the health situation that I brought before. And the migrants, if they had been kept at their work sites from the very beginning, and steps have been taken on that direction, not just giving them 1 or 2 times meals per day, just to keep their subsistence, but providing them with more compensatory things in the form of income. And again, these MSMEs or unorganized entrepreneurs, they do not have this capability. And there the government has to step in. That is what we could think of. And that way, I think that issue could have been solved. Okay, thank you.
Another question is from Anupa Leela George from the Assumption College, Chennai. I think she can ask question directly to Chris.
Okay. Yes, Anupama teacher.
And she puts the question in this way: how the skills of India can be tapped in the COVID situation? How the skills of India can be tapped in the COVID situation?
India's skills, skill in the form of large, I can see it as the lockdown situation, as we know, this movement is curtailed, and then the health sector and other areas only have been working. And to a great extent, our proficiency in this health sector is largely because of the technology advancement that we had. For instance, this transaction and other purposes, we are using more of digital things. Even for education, we are using. And some of the other services we are using. That's always, and work from home, that again has happened in large extent, not large, to some extent. And this, again, reflective of why this could be, it is done or happening, is because of the kind of skill or the technology backup that we have. I don't say skill as such is technology, but using this technology, the skill for using this technology, in fact, helped us. But whatever concern is, a large majority do not have these skills. The digital divide we are talking. And large majority cannot have this skill, and this skill do not have them because of what? They don't have this other educational or other kind of human development things. So skill, of course, will be useful, but we have also to address this deficiency or this large gap that is in this using of skills. Okay, teacher.
Sir, another question is from Grishma Pillai.
Yeah.
Sir, could you comment on the sustainability of fiscal direction taken by the government of Kerala?
Yeah, sustainability of a fiscal part of a state, we mean we use certain measures, how much is fiscal deficit it has, and then how much is the debt content of it. Compared to other states or even India, we know state of Kerala was in a fiscal strain. Its revenue sources are limited, particularly in this time of COVID. And then what it has been getting from the divisional pool from this Finance Commission as GST collected, and also from other kind of income tax. That again is not a significant part, or it is showing a declining trend. And because of this, revenue side, the fiscal deficit have been coming, but while revenue is going down, it's expenditure side. Expenditure for social activities or social welfare measures, and particularly health and education and other things, the state is spending relatively more, and other kind of pensions and other things. And of course, we have this conventional things like interest payments, and then salary and other things. These are the stock items, and that also accounts a larger part of it. So this is about the combination aspect of our fiscal scene. If you look at the story of fiscal aspect of the state, we can find the fiscal side worsen, but it was not so grave a problem for quite even before this COVID-19. The state itself has been keeping this fiscal stability. Then only the grants, and that is one of the conditionalities for getting grants and other kind of transfers of the center. And it was keeping. And only with the central directions or stipulations, what the government can manage it, can go for a kind of collecting resources in the form of debt from the public or from other sources. So it needs the sanction from the part of the government. And that is what the central government has done in this package. It has lifted from 3 to 5. And when that happens, I think the fiscal deficit situation may be more. And as it is more of this, debt aspect, the debt component may be high. And this will be a problem when whether we could be able to repay that. That is the repayment capacity. The fiscal situation may get worse if economic activity is continuing in this disturbed or a disrupted form further, and government do not have much revenue, or its revenue sources may come down, and at the same time it has to incur its stock of expenditures plus additional expenditure at present, this COVID and other things that would arise. And one of the way that the government has been doing is it has introduced this KIFBI, that is outside the budget, to mobilize or to find means for its infrastructure development or investing. So in accounting sense, our fiscal thing is not so weak or so worse. Of course, it has its limitations or other kind of unstable characteristics because of this revenue fall and other things. Even then, in the budgetary announcements, we cannot be so luxurious in this kind of things, because there are central directives or acts like that too. We have to keep that directives. But we are finding means in this KIFBI for other things. And we can expect, what we had to expect is, as the finance minister and others, or this present dispensation is hoping, will recover soon, or and other. But always at the same time, we have this challenge, that is the number added is increasing, and the health sector we are going to face. And if going for another kind of arresting of economic activity to contain it or something like that, we cannot predict how it will happen, because it is so uncertain. At present, I think within 1 or 2 years, if economic activity got momentum and things are happening as expected, we could manage our fiscal situation. Okay, thank you. Joy sir. Joy sir. Hello? Hello?
Yes.
Hello, Philip
Yes,
sir.
Rahul.
Yes, sir. Can I ask you a
Of
question?
course.
Sir, you talked about the absence of strong institutions, basically some kind of a strong institution to advise the government in times of crisis like this. So from that point, I wish to ask a question. So the previous time when India faced a deep recession, the most recent being in 2008, our country managed to rescue itself from it being turning to a depression due to the concerted action from a strong and committed RBI, which was headed by Subbarao back then, which worked hand in hand with a government which was headed by an able economist, Dr. Manmohan Singh. So the fiscal and monetary sides worked alongside each other without shifting the entire burden on one side. But when we look at the present crisis, we can see that the government has shifted the entire responsibility to the monetary side alone by foregoing its own fiscal responsibility, as you have rightly pointed out. So our banking system is weak, and it is evident that monetary policy transmission is failing to induce banks to lend credit. I also feel that the actions of the present government has substantially reduced the autonomy and credibility of RBI, which is now headed by an ex-bureaucrat also. So my question is this, sir. Do you feel that it is high time that India's central bank should come out and tell the government boldly that we are doing our part, we are trying to manage the monetary side, but now you do yours, you have to manage the fiscal side. Similarly, do you think that presently RBI enjoys such an autonomy it used to enjoy back in 2008 when it effectively intervened with the government to control the situation back then? Do you feel that such an autonomous institution is RBI in today's context?
Of course, as a yes or no type answer, of course, RBI should get more autonomy. And I think instead of going for such yes or no, I would say a bit of the situation. Actually, the crisis that we had 2008, it was of a financial crisis, and that crisis was extending to this real economy thing. And the economy up to then, it was in a high growth state. And it was having nearly 8% or 7.5% on average growth for the period from 2004 to 2008. So it was such a vibrant economy. So a vibrant economy to come back after a shock or external shock or something, or some kind of, even that was of internal type shock. It was quite easier. But nowadays, the present situation, we know, the economy was in a very, in a bottom stage or in a very slow down or a slack stage. And then it has so many limitations. And the very economy's form itself playing a very role. It's a so weak an economy and then coming back. And the weakness, I said, it was the demand side. And the fiscal aspect is not added there. And even if a strong RBI or institution or something, if you take 2012-13, what was the situation? we went for some kind of monetary targeting or other things. And that led to a slow growth. In fact, investment has come down. And we had a policy paralysis. And even though the institution of RBI was there, or we had such a autonomy, but even because of their wrong policies, there were these problems. So autonomy should be there, but the point here is both has to work hand in hand. And they have to understand the real situation. And has to do in a very complementary manner. And even this RBI governor himself has been citing these kind of things in his press conferences. In the last 2 weeks back, when he was meeting the press, he was telling the economy was going to 1.5 contraction or negative growth. He was admitting that. And of course it is doing, but how can we have it autonomy? That is also a different question. We have to think autonomy should be there. And then institutions as such should be strengthened. That is what I am telling. Either it is RBI or it is the Planning Commission or kind of other things. That should be strengthened. And that strengthening of institutions itself shows it's a democratic culture rather than everything is in the North Block or something from Delhi or government. I think that way we can look at. Okay, Rahul, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yes. Is it over?
Another question raised by Devasi Ausep.
Okay.
The query is, amidst of COVID-19, the whole world faces a systemic risk. In this environment of economic fear, is it possible for India to tap its demographic dividend? Is it possible for India to tap its demographic dividend? And second question is, would devaluing the currency attract any FII or FDI in the near future?
So this questions type, in fact, I have to be a predictor of things. So everything depends on how much this health hurdle or this health crisis is going to continue. That is the first point I have to add. And it is a fact that India has to derive its or take it demographic dividend. And the question you have put, because of this external factors, how much it is possible. And the COVID as such, the major lesson it has taught us to rely more on our system, within our system, strengthening our resources, enhancing our capabilities. Enhancing our capabilities means particularly the human capital. And the size of our human capital, it's 135 crores. And of the youngster group in that's again, it is 25 to 30% of that. It is a big, out of that, how much is really or educated or having this kind of good health and this is one of the serious problems, that challenges that India is always facing. In every budget, we always, when we make comments about the budget or read about the budget, one of the continuing problem of our public expenditure is we don't adequately address this aspect. The budgetary allocations or government spending on that is, for education, it's about 2 to 2.5%, and in health it is 1.5%, and that is much behind of what is the needed. That's about, for health it is about 5, or education it is about 3. It's much below. So we have to find means for it. So government has to spend largely on it. So I totally agree with your observation that in the international changed context, there is difficulties. But what we have to do is to strengthen our human capital by doing investment domestically. And there is, this public provision has a major role to play there. What is the interesting thing is, either of this budgets, what we find is it is coming down, or even this special package we don't find. And this package, of course, is not to address that, but it is making reference to rebound. And second aspect is the attraction of capital. So the attraction of capital and how much we can attract capital, there is possibility for that. That is how this administration as well as some of the economists are thinking, because the changed international configuration and other things, the international geopolitical situation, India has a possibility. The possibility is mainly because the large extensive market that we have, and also because of this labor is there. And in order to reap this situation again, I would say we have to invest more for this demographic development, or on this demography. And what other countries are going to do, and how these multinational corporations are going to look at India's case, etc. That again is something we have to consider while commenting on this FDI. If things are like this, and as our government is taking every steps to for attracting private capital, and this ease of doing other things, and etc., we can expect a better inflow of FDIs and other things in the coming days. And in that case, I am optimistic. That all depends on this COVID-19 aggravation and other things. And it is worsening like this. Within 1 year, we cannot expect to have it. And if other countries it is bringing down to a great extent, we know South Korea or some of this East Asian countries, Singapore, etc., Hong Kong, etc., its seriousness is not as we face. And this shifting may happen to that places by this, for this FDIs, such possibilities are. So in such a highly flux or uncertain situation, particularly of this grave economic shock, how to make yes or no comment, I fear, but these possibilities I like to share. Thank you, Devasi.
Hello, sir. Another question by Shipra Jain. Are we moving towards a situation of stagflation?
Yeah, stagflation, the textbook definition of stagflation is unemployment and inflation, isn't it? So if you take inflation, the wholesale price index or consumer price index, that is in fact is at a moderate level. So at present, we don't have such inflationary trends in our country. Probably our inflation is low, and that is why we can go for this kind of fiscal deficit at present. So when one of the fear of fiscal deficit is excess spending from the part of government, or the spending may lead to inflation. What situation at present we have is mass unemployment or huge unemployment. It's put at as 23 to 26%. That is some of the estimates. Huge unemployment. And on the one side, we don't have inflation. And we have also unemployment means unproductive resources. And there is unutilized capacities. Given this, even if we go for a fiscal deficit, again, I am coming to that point. We can have a kind of recovery, I feel. So as such, we don't have stagflation as such. And in certain products or in certain agricultural commodities case, as you said, some inflationary trends are coming. But general trend, it is of prices going down. Okay, thank you.
Hello,
yes,
sir.
Come on.
So now the time is 12:34.
Okay.
Is there any possibility of raising some question?
Pardon?
The time is now 12:34.
Yeah.
Yeah. One more question is there in the chat box.
Okay.
Can I ask? Okay.
I've left to the organizers. That is when we have to stop, because it is left to you, your convenience.
The question is like this. Sir, what are the strategies of self-reliant India, or to make India self-reliant?
Yeah, self-reliant India. In fact, it is not a new strategy, we know. Even in our nationalistic movement, Gandhiji's economic idea was of that a self-reliant India. This Gram Swaraj and production in the village. And explicitly in the post-independence period, from the 4th five-year plan onwards, we have taken this idea, this self-reliance. And self-reliant India means producing things in our country, or we are depending on other countries less for our demand. Either it is for investment goods or consumer goods, which means, and it is the import substitution policy and other policies that we adopted, it is meant for that purpose, either for food grains or for other manufactured items. It should be produced. And we have gone for liberalization and opened up. And the interconnectedness of the nations has increased. And the supply chain, or this value chain which we stock. So even for production as well as for our consumption or demand, countries are very much interconnected. So it is, and the liberalization, in fact, it was meant for that. The idea was to have a global village type things, and then one country is specializing in one, another country is specializing in another, and taking advantage of the possible international trade or competitive or efficiency, etc. Then we know its logic or reasons. So the COVID-19, in fact, shattered these kind of ideas. Because of this, countries closed. So the international borders were closed. Within a country, this region-wise borders or state borders were closed. Even within regions or states, villages or towns, like such kind of things, a locking has happened. And then what is needed to meet our needs, sustain our lives and other things? We need things. And we had to depend on our closed spaces, either in the country or in the state or in our locality. And probably this emergency or this situation might have brought out this idea further. And another thing is, in Indian context, we know we have been talking about Make in India program. That again had this self-sufficiency or producing in our own country. And China being a good competitor, it have been taking advantage of our huge market, and it was there. But in manufacturing sector, we have been the losers, or we have been facing a decelerating situation, etc. So it is on the background of these developments, this self-sufficient India we can see. Self-sufficiency in production. Self-sufficiency in production of not only final things, but also the inputs or intermediate items in that production. So the supply chain broken, this intermediate items flow has broken, and resultantly the break in this economic activities. That is one of the reasons. And self-sufficiency at present is this is a natural or logic strategy that one can do. But how much we can pursue that? And if we pursue that itself, can we have it in this liberalized economic context? That is another important question. Because on the one side, we are going to attract foreign direct investment and other things. What its need is to open the economy, domestically as well as foreign. So we cannot have a one side open and one side closed. So we'll be compelled to go with this open economies situation or type with some kind of regulations. And we can find some of the changes that in the recent budget, some imposition of additional taxes or import duties, etc., happening now. And all this needed, again, how much we are going to invest in making our resources efficient, enhancing our capabilities, etc. Then only it will be possible. How we are competing out? We are out when we are competing with China and other things, other countries. The cost of production as such. So we have to think of making it more competitive, or cost effectiveness we have to bring out, and that requires a lot of infrastructure development. It's not simply a labor. And the problem with our industrial backwardness or poor growth, it is not labor, it is lack of skilled labor. And we want skilled labor for this kind of self-sufficient type of growth that we are envisaging. And I think with that, we can conclude.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, now I invite Dr. Anlas Karia to propose the vote of thanks.
Respected Philip sir, academicians, researchers, alumni, students, and dear friends. As most of you know, this is the third lecture in the webinar series. Dr. Philip MP, our former head of the department, gave us an academic fest to all of us with his highly engaging session on COVID-19 economic package, and also with the discussions. I'm sure we all benefited out of this lecture and also the discussions. The Department of Economics is highly indebted to Dr. Philip MP for his constant support, encouragement, and advice to all of you, and above all this lecture. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I would like to thank Mr. Johnson K. Joyce for his wonderful leadership for organizing the webinar for our students and the community at large. I would like to convey my gratitude to all the academicians, researchers, students, and friends who sign up for our webinar. Thank you. Thank you, one and all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Keka. Yeah.
Now the participants can leave the webinar by switching the button that is between the audio and video. Thank you all.
Hello.
Kekam sare.
Teacher.
Indo.
Thank you. Kolavakyo.
രാഹുലെ ബ്ലസ്സി രാഹുലെ ബ്ലസ്സി ഇപ്പൊ എനിക്ക് കാണാവുന്ന പേര് പറയാ. നമുക്ക് വേണമെങ്കിൽ അലുമിനി മീറ്റ് നടത്താന്ന് പറയാം.
ഇഷ്ടംപോലെ നമ്മുടെ പഴയ ആൾക്കാരെല്ലാം ഉണ്ട്. മീബിള്, പിന്നെ നമ്മുടെ രോഹിത്, അങ്ങനെയുള്ള.
നമുക്ക് അലൂമിനി മീറ്റ് ഗൂഗിൾ മീറ്റിലാക്കിയാലോ?
തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും അങ്ങനെ സാധ്യത നമുക്ക് എക്സ്പ്ലോർ ചെയ്യാവുന്നേ ഉള്ളൂ.
നമ്മുടെ നോയൽ വന്നിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നു ഇടയ്ക്ക്, നമ്മുടെ USA പോയി.
അത് കഴിഞ്ഞതിനും ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു, കഴിഞ്ഞ വെബിനാറിനുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അടക്കണമെങ്കിൽ സാറേ എല്ലാരും ഇറങ്ങിപ്പോണം.
അടക്കുന്നില്ലേ?
Our Vidya, Siddharth Debi, Reshma, please leave this meeting.
Hello?
Sister, you can leave this meeting. The meeting is over.